Hey guys, this is Phil with the Minuteman Moment. You seem to like the last reaction video, so we've got another one for you about last week's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on Joe Biden's ATF nominee, David Chipman. Before we get into this though, I just want to tease a little something. Wait till the end of this video because I've got a little surprise for you about an interview we're going to be doing about somebody who's been looking into David Chipman's background and can give you some real good information on who he is. So, let's get into it. For a little bit of context on this hearing and David Chipman, this is the hearing before he goes to the entire Senate floor for a vote. So this is the opportunity that all the senators have who are on that particular committee to be asking him questions about his background, what he thinks, his views, and how he'll be as an ATF director. Now, you have to understand about this particular hearing is that it's not just Chipman here. There's 4 other nominees that they put on there, so there's a total of 5. In any case, what that means is that each senator isn't going to be able to really grill down and get into the details of Chipman's life and career and what he'd be like as a ATF head. But I was really impressed getting him to make certain admissions, in particular about gun grabbing and his views on Americans' right to keep and bear arms. Some of this was pretty revelatory. It's the first time it's coming out. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, here he is. So this first clip is going to be of Texas Senator Ted Cruz. And right off the bat, Cruz gets David Chipman, Joe Biden's nominee for the ATF, to admit he supports gun confiscation. He doesn't come out and say it, but we'll talk about why he ultimately does admit that that's what he wants.
You mean that you don't just want to ban the manufacturer of those rifles, you don't just want to make it illegal to sell those rifles, but you want to actively have government go after the people who currently possess firearms, and if they don't register and submit to all of the onerous restrictions of the National Firearms Act, presumably confiscate their weapons?
Senator, what I've said publicly is that as an advocate, I prefer a system where the AR-15 and other assault weapons are regulated under the National Firearms Act.
Okay, so he's not really answering Senator Cruz's question, but we can make certain inferences there. Number one, you should know David Chipman wants all semi-auto ARs under the National Firearms Act. Right, that's his ultimate goal here. Cruz was very direct and said, what would you do with the firearms that are not put under the NFA? The logical conclusion there is they'd be confiscated. We've been telling you this for decades. This is the ultimate goal, is confiscation. That's where we're headed. That's what he wants, but he can't admit it because he knows that that would be a political death sentence for him and his nomination. So this next one is another really good clip, and it's with Senator Cotton of Arkansas. Senator Cotton asks a really simple question: what is an assault weapon? And the answer that David Chipman gives is so outside the mainstream of what's accepted, not just for Americans who understand what the Second Amendment is about, but even for gun controllers. This is pretty radical. Listen to what Chipman says as far as what his definition of an assault weapon is. That's a term that only exists in the minds of gun controllers, but here's his definition.
So you're asking us to ban assault weapons. We have to write legislation. Can you tell me what is an assault weapon? How would you define it if you were the head of the ATF? How have you defined it over the last several years as your role as a gun control advocate?
Senator, if I'm confirmed as ATF director, my recollection is the only process by which ATF has weighed in is that I know there's a demand letter 3 program which requires multiple reports, multiple sale reports on the southwestern border. And ATF in that program has defined an assault rifle as any semi-automatic rifle capable of accepting a detachable magazine above the caliber of .22, which would include a .223, which is largely the AR-15 round.
Let me stop that right there. Any semi-automatic rifle that is above the caliber of .22 that accepts a detachable box magazine. That's what he said. So I'm going to play the rest of this clip, but stew on that for a minute. Think about what that means.
So you believe that every weapon that takes a detachable magazine that can take a .22 round or .556 in military parlance should be defined as an assault weapon?
Let me clarify. What I believe I just said is any semi-automatic rifle.
Okay, any semi-automatic rifle.
What?
That's the definition. A detachable magazine that takes a .556 or .22 round should be defined as an assault weapon.
Senator, you asked me if ATF had used this term and I was sharing with you my knowledge of a program in which ATF has defined this term.
Okay, I'm just going to stop this right here. Chipman knows he's stuck. He knows that his personal view on gun control and what should be legal and under the NFA and not under the NFA is so insane that he needs to hide from his position. Senator Cotton was really clear. You mean to tell me any rifle that fires a round above 22, that includes the ever-popular .223 and has a detachable box magazine, is an assault weapon, and therefore, in Chipman's world, would be put under the NFA? And the answer is yes. He can't admit that, but that's the answer. Okay, this is Senator Blackburn from Tennessee. This one is about how David Chipman wants to expand the NFA. Don't forget, for David Chipman, the key to all of this is just bringing all these rifles into the NFA, because then they become harder to procure, they become more expensive, and most folks won't be able to buy them, just like they do with suppressors, right? Suppressors are legal, we can buy them, and yet only a very small number of Americans, gun owners, have a suppressor.
And I'm quoting you. Instead, we should regulate a broader class of firearms, including assault weapons manufactured before the law's enactment. One option would be to require the registration of all existing assault weapons under the National Firearms Act while banning the future manufacture and sale of these firearms.
I actually missed that the first time I watched this hearing. Banning the future sale and manufacture of these firearms. So take all of our AR-15s above the caliber of 22 and put them in the NFA and then ban it.
In these statements, you're talking about expanding the National Firearms Act, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that would not be enforcing it as it is written. That would be a change of policy. And then you would ban the future manufacture. That would be a change of policy. Banning the sale would be a change of policy. And in these statements, and going back to that hearing, you were referring to common semi-automatic firearms when you speak of assault weapons, correct?
Senator, in this hearing, I was acting as an advocate and was asked to propose solutions to complex problems.
And you were referring to semi-automatic weapons, correct?
Yes, Senator, but
yes,
as Director of...
Okay, so she gets him to admit what he wants to do is change the ATF policy on your standard AR-15 with regards to the NFA. What he really means is he wants to change the law, but he doesn't want to do it through Congress. He wants to use the ATF's bureaucracy to do it. And Senator Blackburn got him to admit that. Now there's another interesting exchange between Cruz and Chipman, right? And it's on how effective was the Clinton assault weapons ban. Now we know it didn't work, okay? Even an Obama Department of Justice study said it didn't work, did not have its intended effect. It was a failure. Chipman says, I don't know anything about this assault weapons ban study. But Cruz catches him in what I think is a lie, basically, because he's referencing a conversation they had in Senator Cruz's office the day before.
I did enforce this law for 10 years as an ATF agent. I'm unfamiliar with the study that you are pointing out, and I apologize for that.
How did he enforce this law for 10 years and not know the one most important study on its effectiveness? I mean, he's either lying or stupid.
Well, when you and I met in my office last night and discussed it, I asked if there are any data to suggest that the ban was effective. And what you said in the office is you were not aware of any data, that the data was, I think, mixed is the term you used.
Yeah, yes, Senator. What I said to you yesterday, you've accurately stated it. I think it was mixed, which...
Okay, there it is. In the hearing, he said he's not aware of the study. And then in Cruz's office, he said he's not aware of whether or not the data was mixed or not. So he said two different things. This makes you wonder, folks. So the question of how mainstream are these views is an important one. And that's what this exchange between White House and Chipman is about. Let's take a look.
Mr. Chipman, can you think of any position that you have taken regarding firearms that you would pursue at ATF that is out of step with majority views of the American public?
Senator, thank you for that question, and the answer is no.
Oh, no. All right. Case closed. That solves that problem. No, the fact is, Chipman is way out of step with the rest of the country. Okay, here is a short, non-exhaustive list of all the things that David Chipman, who's Biden's nominee for the ATF, supports as far as gun control. He wants to ban 9 commonly and legally owned firearms, accessories, and ammunition. He supports NFA restrictions on all semi-automatic rifles over .22 caliber. He opposes magazines more than 10 rounds. He opposes concealed carry reciprocity. He is totally unapologetic about Waco and his role in that, and the ATF's role. And he opposes open carry. I mean, he's condescending, he's ignorant, and his views are way out of step with those of gun owners. Oh, and there's one more thing about UBCs, universal background checks, which they say Americans universally support and love. When these things get put on a ballot at the state level, they either fail or very, very narrowly pass. America's view towards universal background checks is very mixed. So this idea that there's huge unwavering support for these universal background checks is just simply not true. This was a funny exchange. I think this clip actually went viral on Aiden's Twitter feed. It's just a funny, if you have never seen Senator Kennedy of Louisiana going back and forth with anybody, a reporter, a witness, his interviews, they're really funny because he gets his point across, but also in a way that isn't totally in your face.
Do you believe in banning assault weapons?
I do, sir.
Okay. Define assault weapons.
Assault weapons would be something that members of Congress would define.
Well, how do you define it? You're going to be running the agency.
Senator, I think this is a good question. If I am confirmed as ATF director,
I got 35 seconds left. Define it for me, would you please, sir? What's an assault weapon?
yeah, Senator, the bill to ban assault weapons
what is your
dozens of
definition of an
pages. There's
assault
no way I could define an assault weapon.
You don't have any, you're going to run this agency and you don't have a definition of assault weapon?
Let me stop this right here and then we'll finish the clip. There is no way I can define an assault weapon. His entire career is banning assault weapons. How does he not know how to define one?
But I would be enforcing the definition that members of Congress
you're going to be
passed.
issuing rules and regulations. Just give me your definition.
I'll give you one definition.
If you remember at the beginning of this video, he said he wants to put AR-15s above the caliber of .22 into the NFA because they're assault weapons. And now Senator Kennedy of Louisiana is asking him to define an assault weapon, and he's saying he can't do it. This guy's all over the place. I don't think he's fit to be in charge of a garage sale.
I'll give you one definition that ATF
Give me your
currently
definition.
uses. One definition that ATF currently
Give me your definition.
I can give you one definition.
If you won't
that
answer
ATF
my
currently
question, how can I vote for you? I'm done, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I'm going to get an answer.
That was unbelievably cringy. If I didn't dislike Chipman so much, I'd almost feel bad for him. I love that clip because it's simple and to the point. He couldn't answer. He can't answer because he knows, going back to Senator Whitehouse's question, his views, Chipman's views, are way outside the mainstream of the American public. Senator Kennedy, the same Senator Kennedy we just saw, asked David Chipman, what guns do you own? Okay? Simple question, just like the last one. Get a load of this.
Yes,
What do you
sir.
own, by the way?
That's a pretty private question. I have, I'll share the gun I'm proudest of. It's a Smith & Wesson Treasury commemorative gun, and the serial number is my birth date.
Oh, that's cool. Congratulations.
Kennedy is a savage. In this hearing, Cruz, Lee, Cotton, Hawley, Blackburn, they piled on Chipman hard. Do you see why this is so stunning? He should have been happy to tell you what guns he owned because he believes in a registry, and yet he didn't do it because he's an elite and he thinks there are two different standards of justice, one for him and one for us. All right, so there was a lot of controversy over David Chipman's comments on the Branch Davidians in Waco. But in particular, there was something he said publicly about the Branch Davidians using a .50 cal to shoot down police helicopters, which didn't happen. Factually didn't happen. We talked about that in our last Minuteman Moment video. But I want to play this clip, and then I want to talk about what a win this is for all of us.
I got a question about the lethality of the .50 caliber rifle and how often it was used in crime in the United States. And I was trying to be candid and say that the only case that I knew of that .50 calibers were used was at this incident at Waco that I was familiar with. And I was also familiar that Branch Davidians had in fact shot two of the planes, helicopters. There were bullet holes, and I saw the pictures of that. I could have done a better job by describing them as being forced down because of the gunfire as opposed to shot down, which might have left the impression that they were blown out of the sky, which they were not. And I regret that confusion I added.
There's a big difference between being shot down and being forced down. This is the problem with him. He's loose with the facts. And this is the guy who's going to potentially head up the ATF. This is the nominee from the Biden administration. But there's a bigger point here, and this is the win for all of us. Without all of you making noise about this, he would have gotten away with that, without question. The mainstream media was not going to call him on this. We made the noise. Like I said, we made a Minuteman Moment video about this. We made the noise, and with all of us, including all of those of you watching, he didn't get away with it. He had to pull back on his statement. But this is a big, big win, and I want everybody to take account of that. This is why we're here. All of the questions that Senator Lee from Utah asked were among my favorites. Top 5, top 10. David Chipman believes in pre-crime. There's no other way to say it. He believes in pre-crime. Don't believe me? Just watch this.
With respect to the other quote, I'll just say
So
briefly.
are you saying that what you in fact meant was before committing other crimes and after committing a predicate crime? Is that what you're telling me that you meant when you said this is a perfect opportunity to arrest people before committing crimes rather than responding after the fact? Is that what you meant?
Senator, thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to clarify. What I said was that I think that in certain circumstances, it is absolutely the mission of ATF to arrest people for lying on a federal firearms form, a 5-year felony.
Right, because that's a crime. That is a crime.
And it's the one I was speaking about in the quote that you were saying, sir.
Okay, but you said before committing crimes.
Before committing an additional violent crime, which is something I was seeing at ATF, that people would lie and try and then go through other means, acquire a gun and hurt someone.
So, yes, it is a felony to lie on your 4473, your background check. That is a felony. What Chipman is saying, he wants to arrest people on the spot who fail these background checks. Newsflash, David Chipman, 95% of these failures are false positive. That means they come back as failures, but they're actually not. So he thinks everybody who fails a 4473 background check is going to commit a crime. This is the way he sees Americans. Forget about the way he sees gun owners. This is the way he sees Americans. Violent people that just want to commit crimes.
You have oftentimes the ability to talk to the media. Sometimes that's taken out of context, and I'm sorry for any confusion I made when I was trying to point out the fact that sometimes bringing a gun into your home if you're untrained is a particularly dangerous thing to do.
It does concern me that these statements that you say are taken out of context or misunderstood are not themselves out of context. When you view them in context against other statements you've made, including statements that you made while you were representing as a lobbyist Americans for a Responsible Solution.
What Chipman is talking about in the exchange with Senator Lee I just played for you is basically Chipman was interviewed and he made some really disparaging remarks about first-time gun owners. And he keeps having to explain himself. This is out of context. This is out of context. That's out of context. Here's the context. He's making fun of new gun owners who in 2020, during the riots, bought their first firearm. People armed themselves in what might have been the most terrifying moment of their entire life. They did what any normal person would do. They bought a firearm to protect themselves, their family, and their neighborhoods. So what Chipman was saying, this exchange with Lee, is, as I said, is about this other video, and Chipman is basically saying these people are buying guns and not getting training. I reject this entire premise that new gun owners aren't getting training. You know how I know? Have you tried to buy 9mm or .223 lately? We know there's a shortage. There's a big run on it. People are out there trying to get familiarized with their new firearms. Have you been to a gun range? You can go to any gun range within an hour of my house and there's an hour wait. Why is that? Because people are training. They're buying it. They're having friends show them how to use their firearms safely and efficiently and to protect themselves and their loved ones. So this whole idea that people are buying these guns and they're inherently dangerous because they don't know how to use them is totally false. I don't believe it for 1 minute. I think they are training. I think that's a big part of gun culture is knowing how to use your firearm. That's the first thing I did, even before I bought my first gun. I'm working under the premise, which I think is true, that Americans are training with their new firearms. But it's more interesting to me why so many people decided to get their first firearm. It's because they saw their local and state governments fail them. That's the more interesting question. Not how many rounds are you putting downrange and are you, as tactical as me, David Chipman. That's what's important to be asking. Instead, he wants to hide from the failures of some of these terrible state governors, and he wants to put the focus on you gun owners who have done nothing wrong. Here's a clip of Senator Lee just demolishing David Chipman. I mean, Chipman is totally outclassed here.
You were talking about silencers, about sound suppressors used on firearms. You said, you know what protects your hearing better than a silencer? Earplugs. And you went on to say that making it easier for people to purchase silencers would make it easier for active shooters to inflict serious harm on our communities without being protected by trained law enforcement professionals. Now, the Washington Post, hardly a bastion of conservative right-wing nutcase journalism, gave that 3 Pinocchios. You were even more acerbic. You were even more aggressive. And I believe even more reckless when you gave a similar comment to the Salt Lake Tribune, my hometown paper, in response to the legislation I had filed dealing with sound suppressors for firearms, recognizing that there are legitimate medical reasons why someone might want to protect their hearing, using a combination of earplugs and sound suppressors. You said, quote, "The only people that benefit from this bill are gun lobbyists and criminals who want easier access to deadly weapons. That's why this irresponsible legislation couldn't get passed when Republicans had complete control of Congress. Instead of making it easier for firearms that could be used in ambushes and other attacks to enter our streets, Congress should focus on making the job of police officers who are trained to serve and protect the communities and their families safer." You're saying that the only people who could benefit from them are gun lobbyists and criminals who want to kill people. Is that statement also taken out of context? If so, what was the additional context? And how does this reflect the careful, measured judgment of one who would be in charge of enforcing our nation's gun laws?
Okay, so that was brutal. It was subtle, but it was brutal. The only people who want this bill to pass are the gun lobbies and criminals. Again, you could not possibly have a single legitimate reason to want to own a suppressor. Not that it's good for your hearing, not that it reduces muzzle flash when you're shooting at night. Maybe you're hunting at night. They're just fun. Let's call it what it is. Cool. And yes, we need to have comparable firearms to the government. That's what it comes down to. Senator Lee asked him a very direct question, and he can't answer it. And this next one is a follow-up to that. And this is when Senator Lee really just loses it on him, because Chipman is, as he's done the entire hearing, he's just sort of hiding behind, he does this sort of like double speak thing. When he says, let me be clear, let me put this in context. But the context never gives you more information. It hides more than it reveals. And so this is Senator Lee and Chipman right after the exchange that I just played you.
But that's not what I'm complaining about. What I'm complaining about is that you said the only people who could support this are gun lobbyists and people who want to engage in illegal shootings, people who want to engage in mass shootings or something like that. Do you stand by that statement?
Senator, I was trying to contrast the fact that silencers are legal. You purchase them through the National Firearms Act. The people who want them unregulated are those that want to have easier access.
You're not going to spit downwind and then tell us it's just raining. I mean, I'm sorry, there is no reasonable reading of this statement that can be interpreted this way. The only people that benefit from this bill are gun lobbyists and criminals who want easier access to deadly weapons. Is it not also true that some people might want to protect their hearing while shooting?
Senator, as I said before, it's my belief that those who want to buy silencers to protect their hearing, there's a method to do that. There are many companies that sell National Firearms Act weapons, and there's a process to do that.
Yep.
What I was addressing was making it easier for criminals to use silencers, a threat that our nation has really avoided because of a strong law passed in 1930.
Yeah. All right. Look, I get it. My time's expired. That's not what you said. That's not what you said at all. Nor is that the impact that this bill would have. The fact is that most people don't get sound suppressors because of the regulatorily inexpensive, time-consuming, burdensome process that is imposed by this law. And I think this is very concerning for someone who's had a series of inflammatory statements. It's very concerning that we're considering confirming you to be our lead law enforcement officer for our gun laws. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I think a big thing to be thinking about with this one, and this is our last clip for today. I think a big thing to be thinking about this one is that Chipman doesn't like the Lee bill because it takes suppressors off of the NFA, because it lets, in Chipman's view, criminals have easier access to. He wants to make them harder to get. He understands that. Otherwise, why would he support keeping them on the NFA? Because he knows it's harder to get them. As I said earlier, only a small number of people with firearms have suppressors. Why? Because if it's on the NFA, it's very hard to get, and it's expensive. You have to wait months. He knows that, and Senator Lee caught him in that lie. Gun lobbyists and criminals. Which one is Mike Lee? Probably one of the smartest senators in the Senate, and he is speaking boldly and truthfully to David Chipman, who doesn't deserve to be head of the ATF. So all in all, it was a really good hearing. I thought all of the Republican senators who questioned David Chipman did a great job. Really proud of all of them. But I want to read you one tweet from somebody who was not involved in the hearing and isn't even a senator. It's Lauren Boebert out of Colorado. I think she summed it up well. There is no such thing as an assault weapon. That is a Democrat-manufactured term, which means any gun that the Democrats wish to demonize. It's just like critical race theory. They make up terms to sound official as they steal your liberty and teach you to hate yourself. I think that is a good way to wrap up this video. I'm really, really glad with how strong the senators were in this hearing. That's it for this Minute Man. Glad you tuned in. One more thing. Right after this, I'm going to be interviewing somebody whose job is to do opposition research on people, specifically nominees for federal government. When this drops, I think we'll be breaking some news with all of you. There's some things that are maybe public but not well known, maybe some things that haven't been talked about in other avenues, but it is going to be a great interview. I mean, it just might light the place on fire, to be honest. So, all right, that's it for this week. Appreciate you tuning into the Minuteman Moment. I'm Phil. I'll see you next time.